I still remember the sound their truck made when it crawled into our tiny town. This slow, uneven rumble that felt way too loud for a place where even dogs seemed embarrassed to bark after sunset. I was sitting on my porch with a warm cola, trying to cool off from one of those fake winter nights we get here, when those new neighbors drifted past like they were trying not to disturb the air. There were three of them, I think. Hard to tell in the dark. Skinny silhouettes, stiff as coat racks, sitting perfectly straight in the moving truck's front seat. No music, no chatter, just that hum like the engine was whispering to itself. Their house had been empty for years, the kind of place kids dared each other to touch because the porch boards made this awful choking sound when you stepped on them. But when the truck stopped, all three doors opened at the same exact second, like someone had counted down. Nobody said a word. They didn't even look around. They just stood there for a moment, staring up at the house as if it were something sacred or dangerous. I honestly couldn't tell. Then they went inside, without turning on a single light. Later, way later, around midnight, I saw the glow. I'd gotten up to close the curtains because the wind started rattling something against the siding, and that's when I noticed their house pulsing with tiny white dots, Christmas lights. Not the fun, messy kind your uncle strings up after 4 beers. Now these were perfect. Perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, stretched across their gutters and windows like someone had measured every inch with a ruler and a prayer. But the weirdest part? I swear on my mom's old Bible, they hadn't been there an hour earlier. And there they were, the new neighbors, moving slowly along the roofline, clipping the last string, all three of them, in the dark, no ladder, no sound, just those tiny lights reflecting off faces that didn't look like they were meant to smile. That's when something hit me. Something small and cold like a pebble. It bounced near my foot. I looked down and saw a bit of broken bulb glass. When I looked back up, all three neighbors were standing still, facing my house, watching me. No wave, no nod, no good evening, just those three motionless figures in the glow of those impossibly straight lights, staring like they were waiting for me to blink first. I ducked inside so fast I almost slammed my own fingers in the door. I didn't sleep that night, mostly because every time I shut my eyes, I kept seeing that perfect white glow across the street, breathing in and out like it was alive. And I swear, I swear, the lights rearranged themselves once before sunrise, as if the house was trying out a different smile.
I started hearing it the very next night, the soft, careful rhythm outside my window, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. At first, I thought it was just branches, or maybe that beat-up trash can lid the wind kept bullying around. But branches don't pause, and the wind doesn't walk in a straight line. These steps did. Same number every time. 5 slow ones. Quiet stop. Then 5 more. Around 1:40 a.m., I cracked my blinds with 2 fingers, just enough to see the street. It looked empty at first. No cars, no porch lights. Nothing but that thin November mist lying across the road like a blanket someone forgot to fold. Then I saw movement. One of the new neighbors, tall, the shape of him almost too narrow, was gliding along the sidewalk. And I don't mean walking, not really. His feet touched the ground, but his upper body didn't sway. No natural bounce, no shifting weight. It was like watching a puppet someone was operating wrong. He didn't carry anything. Didn't look around, didn't even breathe from what I could tell. Just those 5 steps. Pause. 5 steps. Like he was counting something only he could hear. I was leaning closer to the window without even realizing it, forehead almost touching the cold glass, when another figure appeared behind him. Same height, same posture, same everything. They didn't talk to each other, didn't acknowledge each other. They just patrolled the street in perfect, eerie silence. And then, as they passed under the weak glow of a street lamp, I noticed something that made my stomach fold into itself. Their shadows didn't quite match their movements. Half a second behind, like a lagging video. At some point, they stopped, both of them turning their heads in perfect unison toward the house at the end of the block, old Mrs. Hatley's place. Her porch light flickered twice, as if reacting, and then went completely dark. The neighbors stood there for a long minute, facing her blacked-out doorway, not moving, not breathing, just staring. Then, as though someone pressed a button, they both resumed walking, same 5 steps, same pause, the rhythm echoing in my bones like it belonged there. I didn't sleep after that. Couldn't. Because the last thing I saw before shutting the blinds was this. On the far side of the street, the third neighbor stood completely still, facing my house, hands at his sides, head slightly tilted, as if he just realized I'd been watching. And maybe I imagined it. God, I hope I imagined it. But I thought I saw the tiniest smile pull at the side of his mouth. Too slow, too deliberate, too aware.
By the end of that week, the whole town had quietly agreed on one thing. The new neighbors were polite enough, which in our town was code for, we don't know what they are, but we're too scared to make it official. They never spoke, not to each other, not to us, not even when someone waved from across the street. But every night, their house transformed a little more. The lights, those perfect ruler-straight Christmas lights, spread across the roof in new lines, weaving into patterns that didn't look festive so much as mathematical. Like constellations someone was trying to rebuild from memory. Nobody saw them install anything, but by morning, something new always appeared. The whole town pretended not to stare, but we did. God, we did. Especially the kids. Last Thursday, a group of them, 4 little troublemakers who always smell like chips and wet mittens, dared each other to go touch the new neighbor's door. I watched from my porch, pretending to sweep leaves that didn't exist. They marched up the walkway, whispering and snickering, until they reached the porch. The oldest boy, the one with the bowl cut so straight it looked carved, tapped the door with one knuckle. Just one. And the door swung open instantly. Not all the way, just a crack, wide enough to show the dark inside. Too dark, actually, as if the house swallowed whatever light touched it. The kids froze. You could see the bravado evaporate. The little girl with the red hoodie whispered, no, and tugged at the others. Then, something moved inside the house. Just a shift in the blackness. A shape leaning forward, slow as syrup. The door creaked wider on its own. None of the neighbors appeared. No greeting. No, "You okay, kids?" Just darkness leaning toward them like a curious animal. The kids bolted. 3 of them ran home. The 4th, bowl-cut boy, sprinted straight across the street and didn't stop until he crashed into his own front lawn. I know because I stayed there like an idiot, broom in hand,
heart pounding like it wanted to file a noise complaint. That night, the house got even brighter. Dozens of new lights lined the walkway, each bulb exactly the same height from the ground. Perfect spacing, perfect angles, not a single one tilted, as if they hadn't been hung by human hands at all, but printed onto the air. And that's when I noticed something I can't unsee now. The three neighbors often stood inside the house, near the windows, silhouettes framed in that glowing white, a taller one, a shorter one, and one the exact height in between. A family, I guess, if you were desperate to label them. But the shapes were too still, too straight, too identical. I watched them for a full minute, waiting for one to scratch their nose or shift their weight or clear their throat. Normal human things. Nothing. Not even a blink. Just three shadows that look like people, placed there with the care you might use when arranging props in a store window. A perfect little family, if you didn't look too close.
By the time Chapter 4 rolled around in my life, not that I knew I was living in chapters, I developed this ridiculous habit of tiptoeing through my own house after dark. Like being quiet would somehow make me less noticeable to the people across the street who never seemed to blink. It started when I caught the middle-height neighbor staring right at my window at 3:12 a.m., and I only know the exact time because the microwave clock was the only thing glowing in my kitchen. Anyway, after that, I moved like the house was full of landmines. Around midnight the next night, I finally convinced myself I was being stupid. Just look, I muttered. Just check, and then go to bed. So I eased the blinds up with 2 fingers. I shouldn't have. All 3 of them were standing in their own front window. Same positions as the night before, same angles of their heads, same everything. It was like they'd been frozen in place and someone hit unpause the second I looked. The tallest one shifted his head, just a few degrees, not enough to call it a turn exactly, more like he'd calibrated his gaze, right at me. My chest tightened. For a second I actually forgot to breathe. I let the blind snap shut way too fast, and the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. I winced. I stood there, holding my own breath hostage, waiting to hear if they'd react somehow. At first, nothing. Then, I heard it. Not footsteps, not knocking, just this sound. A faint scraping across pavement. Slow, even, deliberate. I crept back to the window, lifting the blinds just enough to make a slit. They were gone. But the lights on their house, those perfect, unnervingly straight lights, began flickering one by one, not randomly, in a pattern, a sequence, like the lights were blinking out a code. Then the scraping grew louder. My heart dropped when I realized what it was. The neighbor's shoes dragging across the street. Not walking, not shuffling, just dragging in long synchronized strokes like they didn't quite know how legs were supposed to work. They moved straight to my driveway, all 3. They didn't come to the door, didn't touch anything. They just stood there at the edge of the concrete, perfectly aligned, perfectly still, heads tilted up toward my window. I ducked below the sill so fast my teeth clacked. For a few seconds, the only thing I heard was my own pulse exploding in my ears. Then the scraping started again, retreating this time, not approaching. I waited until the sound faded before I dared peek outside. They were gone. back inside their house, lights pulsing gently like a breathing chest. I backed away from the window and sat down on the floor because my legs just gave out a little. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only come over for one reason. Not to see me, but to let me know they already knew I'd been watching. By the fifth night, the whole street had started losing things. Nothing dramatic. Nobody was missing a TV or a family heirloom or anything you could make a police report out of. It was all small stuff. Things you'd normally blame on your own forgetfulness. Except it wasn't forgetfulness. Not this time. Old Mr. Travers swore he'd left his wooden reindeer on the lawn, and the next morning it was gone. Mrs. Woolcott's plastic candy canes vanished right off her porch railing. Someone's mailbox bow disappeared clean off the post. The zip ties were still there, neatly snipped. People shrugged, joked, blamed teenagers, but the laughter always faded fast. Nobody really believed it, because every single missing item eventually reappeared on the neighbor's house. I noticed it first on Thursday. I was staring out my front window again. I'd practically made my couch a surveillance post when I saw a familiar red and white striped candy cane tucked into the neighbor's light display. Perfectly straight, perfectly placed, like it was part of some diagram only they understood. That was the same candy cane Mrs. Woolcott had put up 2 days ago. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she'd dropped it. Maybe someone returned it. Maybe anything. I held on to that maybe like a life raft until the next night. Because on the next night, the neighbors added something else to their display. The wooden reindeer from Mr. Travers' lawn. Except it wasn't standing anymore. They'd flat out dismantled it, piece by piece. The antlers made into symmetrical corner markers, the legs aligned below one window, the body boards woven into the grid of lights like the world's least festive puzzle. It looked intentional, not decorative, architectural, built for a purpose no holiday tradition ever needed. People on the street finally started whispering. I overheard Mrs. Woolcott outside with her sister, saying, "They're building something. I don't know what, but it's not for Christmas." Her sister muttered, "Call the sheriff," and Mrs. Woolcott whispered back, "And tell him what? That my lawn candy cane migrated across the road by itself?" She sounded scared, and when adults in a small town get scared, you feel it in the air. Thick, quiet, unsure. But the weirdest moment came later that evening. Around 11 p.m., I went out to grab the mail I'd forgotten earlier. The night felt heavy, like the air had weight. I walked down my driveway, opened my mailbox, and froze. The little holiday magnet I'd stuck on the side of the mailbox, a silly, smiling snowman I'd had for years, was gone. Completely peeled off. For a second, I just stood there in the dark, holding bills with trembling fingers. I turned my head slowly toward the neighbor's house, and there he was, my snowman magnet, placed dead center on their front door, perfectly level, not crooked by even a hair. The door reflected the white lights, and for just a moment, maybe a trick of the brightness, maybe my imagination, I saw the faint shape of a face behind the glass, watching me. I backed away so fast I tripped over my own mailbox post and had to bite down on a yell. I scrambled up, heart in my mouth, and practically sprinted back into my house. Only later, lying awake in the dark, did the full horror sink in. They weren't just taking decorations. They were collecting pieces of everyone, every house, every family, every life on our street. and arranging them into something that was slowly, steadily getting bigger. Whatever they were building, it wasn't meant to celebrate Christmas. It was meant to mean something. Something for them. It happened to Devin. Poor guy never even pretended to be brave. He was the type to cross the street to avoid a squirrel. But he'd had enough. His mailbox bow went missing, then the little wooden sled his daughter painted in kindergarten. When he saw the sled nailed into the neighbor's light grid like a centerpiece, something in him snapped. He marched right across the street in broad daylight, which, honestly, already felt like breaking a law around those people. I watched from my porch, pretending to check my gutters. Devin didn't even hesitate. He stomped up their sidewalk and knocked hard. 3 sharp bangs. Then he waited. No footsteps inside. No whisper of movement. Just that weird stillness that clung to their house like a second skin. He knocked again. Nothing. He tried the door handle. Locked. After maybe a minute, he turned back toward the street looking humiliated and more than a little spooked. "Nobody home," he muttered. "Figures." He walked away. And that should have been the end of it. But around 1 a.m., when the whole street was asleep, Devin's front door camera caught something he didn't see until later. 3 figures walked up to his porch. No talking, no hesitation, just appeared out of the darkness like the night spit them out. The tall one stood dead center, the shorter one to his right, the middle-height one to his left. Perfect spacing, perfect symmetry, like they practiced. Devin told us later he'd been half asleep when the doorbell rang. He thought it was a prank, maybe teenagers, maybe a package dropped late. He opened the door without checking the peephole. And there they were, all 3 neighbors, staring at him from inches away. He said their faces were wrong up close. "Too smooth," he murmured, rubbing his forehead during the retelling, "like they ironed out whatever makes a face human." He asked them what they wanted. They didn't answer, didn't even blink, just stood there. The tall one lifted his hand slowly, like his joints were remembering how elbows worked. He opened his palm toward Devin, not offering anything, not asking for anything. More like he was showing Devin the shape of a hand, as if expecting him to copy it. Devin said his blood ran cold. Something primal in him screamed to shut the door. He whispered, "I'm sorry about earlier," though he didn't know why he said it. The words just slipped out, like apologizing to a predator. The tall neighbor tilted his head once, too slow, too intentional. Then all 3 of them stepped back at the exact same second and turned away in perfect sync, disappearing into the night. They never touched him, never spoke, never tried to enter. But the next morning when Devin checked his porch, he found something waiting for him. His daughter's wooden sled. Perfectly repainted, perfect lines, colors too even, too uniform, like it had been machine printed, not painted by a 5-year-old's shaky hands. On the back, in tiny lettering, someone had added, "We fixed it." That same afternoon, Devin's house went dark, lights off, curtains drawn, no car leaving, no sound. For 2 days straight, you could knock and call and shout his name. No answer. Nobody's seen him outside since. And at night now, when the neighbors turn on their lights, one more object has joined their display. The sled. Centered, perfectly straight, like it belonged to them all along. By the time Devin disappeared into his own house, like he'd been erased from inside out, the neighbor's light display had started doing something new, something I swear no normal wiring could do. It began blinking. Not flickering like old bulbs, not wavering like cheap timers. Blinking. In sequences. At first it was subtle, a soft pulse running along the gutters, traveling from right to left like a wave humming through a body. Then the lights would pause all at once, a single frozen moment where everything went perfectly still, before beginning again. Right to left, freeze, left to right, freeze, almost like scanning. Mrs. Lewis from 3 houses down called it a festive malfunction, but nobody really bought that, not when the timing was too perfect, too controlled, too aware. And the patterns kept evolving. Last Tuesday, around 11 p.m., I was doing my now nightly ritual of pretending not to watch through the blinds when the lights started pulsing in a rhythm I could feel in my chest. Just a soft thump, thump glow that matched my heartbeat so precisely it made me lightheaded. Thump, lights brightened. Thump, lights dimmed. Thump, thump. I pressed my palm to my sternum just to check I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't. And then, slowly, the rhythm sped up, faster than my pulse, like it was trying to pull mine along with it. I stepped back from the window hard enough that my heel caught the rug and made me stumble. The second I moved away, the lights went still again. Not off, just still, like they were waiting. That's when I saw them. The neighbors were standing in their window again, all 3, but this time their heads were tilted upward as if listening to something above them. The glow from the lights etched their silhouettes in a sharp, unnatural white that made their limbs look wrong. Too long, too narrow, like shadows stretched on purpose. The tallest one lifted his hand slowly and placed it on the glass. A moment later, the lights shifted into a new sequence, tiny stuttering flickers moving down the columns like data streaming through fiber optics. That's when I realized these weren't decorations anymore. They were communication. The lights weren't shining at us. They were sending something out. At 2 a.m., the whole street woke to the sky above us glowing faintly, just a smear of pale color, maybe a reflection, maybe not. People stood on their porches in bathrobes and slippers, rubbing their eyes and staring upward like they expected something to descend. The neighbors didn't come outside, but their lights responded immediately, brightening, tightening into sharper lines, almost vibrating. And then, without warning, everything on their house flared at once. A perfectly white flash, silent, instant, blinding. Like a camera taking a picture of the entire neighborhood in one impossible blink. People cried out, a dog wailed, someone shouted a curse, and when the light faded, the sky was ordinary again, empty and dark. But the neighbors, they were standing outside their house now, all 3, facing the sky, arms raised, still. Like antennas. Nobody approached them. Nobody breathed too loudly. Nobody did anything but watch. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the neighbors lowered their arms simultaneously and walked back inside as one single organism. The lights shut off. The street dropped into a heavy, suffocating blackness. And I swear, just before they vanished into the house, the shortest one turned its head toward me, like it knew exactly which window I was behind. Only this time, the face looked different. Not angry, not empty, not curious, but pleased, as if the lights had done exactly what they were meant to do. By morning, everyone on our block pretended nothing happened. That's how people cope here, act normal until normal feels real again. But the air was different, heavy, stretched thin, like sound traveled slower. By dusk, a few of us gathered on the sidewalk near Mrs. Woolcott's fence, trying to look casual. Nobody said meeting, but that's what it was. People kept glancing at the neighbor's house without moving their heads, like prey animals checking for predators. Finally, Mr. Travers whispered, "We need to call someone." "Call who?" someone shot back. "And say what? That the Christmas lights are too organized?" A nervous laugh went around, thin as paper. Then Mrs. Lewis leaned forward and whispered, "They were signaling last night. You all saw it." Nobody admitted it. Nobody denied it. We just stood there, swallowing the same fear. A breeze moved down the street, but it felt wrong. Too cold, too precise, carrying this faint electrical buzz that made my teeth ache. And suddenly, every porch light flickered at once. We went silent. Across the street, the neighbor's house stayed dark, but I could feel them inside, watching, listening, like the air around their home had ears. "I should stop talking out here," I whispered. Everyone nodded at the same moment, too quickly. People backed away, returning to their doors in stiff, hurried steps. No goodbyes, no last glances. And when I reached my own porch, I noticed something new. A single white bulb, identical to theirs, lay on my doormat. Perfect, untouched, waiting. It was the night before Christmas Eve when everything shifted. Around 11 p.m., I heard doors opening up and down the block. Soft clicks, one after another, like a row of locks turning themselves. I peeked outside and saw neighbors stepping onto their porches, all with the same dazed look, like they'd woken from the same dream. Then I realized they weren't looking at each other. They were looking toward one house. Their house. The quiet neighbors were already outside, standing at the end of their walkway, not moving, not speaking. Their white lights, usually still or pulsing, were now cycling through slow waves of brightness, like breath rising and falling. Every few seconds, the three figures tilted their heads in unison, as if scanning the street, as if counting us. Someone whispered, "Are they caroling?" And honestly, that's exactly what it looked like. The stance, the posture, the way they stood together as a perfect trio. Except they didn't have songbooks, and nobody opened their mouths. Yet the lights on their house began flashing in rhythmic beats, soft, measured, musical, but not in any way a human ear could hum. A few people stepped off their porches without seeming to decide to do so, drawn forward, pulled. The neighbors raised their hands slowly, palms outward, as if inviting the entire street to join them. My stomach twisted. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't move," so I held on to the doorknob like it was a lifeline. Across the street, the tallest neighbor finally lowered his hand and pointed straight at my house. Not a big gesture, just a precise, deliberate indication, like marking me on a list. Then the lights on their house flashed once, a bright, blinding pulse, and everything went silent. No buzzing, no murmurs, no footsteps. Just 3 figures waiting in the cold, waiting for something or someone.
I should have known they'd come for me. After all the staring, the lights, the pointing, it was always going to end at my door. It was exactly midnight when the knock came. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 soft taps, evenly spaced, like someone politely asking to borrow sugar. My whole body went cold. I didn't go near the peephole. Somehow I already knew who was on the other side. Instead, I stood frozen in the hallway, holding my breath like that would make me invisible. Then came the second knock. Same rhythm, same calmness, but closer somehow, like the sound traveled through my bones instead of the wood. Finally, I forced myself forward 1 step, then another, until I was close enough to hear it, a faint hum behind the door. Electrical, rhythmic, too steady to be human breathing. And then a voice spoke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even shaped quite right, like someone had learned to talk by copying recordings, but never understood emotion. "We want to sing you a Christmas song." My hand tightened on the doorknob. I didn't turn it. I couldn't. The voice came again, a little softer, almost pleading this time. "Let us sing for you." The lights in my living room dimmed. My phone screen flickered and died. Something on the other side of the door shifted its weight, but not in the way a person does, more like something adjusting height or shape. The third knock wasn't polite anymore. It was expectant, like the beginning of a countdown. I backed away slowly, step by shaky step, until I reached the kitchen. The knocking stopped, the hum faded, the house went painfully silent. I didn't sleep. I kept every light off, every curtain closed, and just before dawn, when I finally dared to peek outside, there was something waiting on my porch. A perfect white bulb, identical to theirs, wired into my doorframe while I slept, glowing softly, waiting for the rest of the lights to join it, waiting for me.